Welcome to the Herland Report, Danish journalist, Berlin-based Tommy Hansen. You are the founder and host of the well-renowned website Free21. I hear you have over 150 writers with you, and you write about the wars in the Middle East, about the driving forces behind the crisis in the West, about the dollar and the Saudi system, and we see a lot of issues going on in the Middle East. Of course, the Shia-Sunni divide and civil war, one may say. We see the blatant Western support to Al-Qaeda affiliated groups, millions on the run, and country after country being torn down, Libya, Syria. From your line of work, you've also spoken a lot about how the American dollar and its connection to the Saudi House of Saud and system really influences what's happening in the Middle East. Can you elaborate, please?
Yes, well, thank you very much for having me here. The American dollar, in its as we know it now, is merely an instrument of waging wars. And it's been used like that ever since Nixon in '71 left the gold standard. Most people don't know or don't realize the importance of this step, mostly because the mainstream media does not address this issue at all. But you have to realize that by leaving the gold standard, there was no security whatsoever that the U.S. would not print more dollar bills than they had actually than they could actually afford. It was only a matter of trust, and as we know now today, since then the U.S. Through the Federal Reserve System has been creating money out of thin air. And the Western governments, including the Danish government, has been doing exactly the same. This system is not only an illusion, but it's a perversion of capitalism. It's a perversion of the free markets. And thank God, a lot of people in high finance realize this and are working with solutions to save us all when this dollar mountain is going to collapse, because it will, and it's just a matter of time. You can't say when, but you can say mathematically that this system will collapse once more, and if so, it will be a permanent collapse, and we will never ever regain from it again. It is very, very simple. We have crooks who have access to money making, and that's not a good combination. I can give you an example, because last year in Denmark I was not asked. We decided to buy new fighters for the jet fighters for the military, for I think it was 16 billion kroner, money that we didn't have. And we don't have any money for social security or for elderly people or for wherever it's needed. So out of the blue, the Danish government made 16 billion kroner, and the money went to produce more military equipment. You have to understand, if you look at the American household today, I have the numbers from 2015, but in 2015, or else you can say the American household is divided into two parts. One part is by law said what it should be used for, and the other part is free. In this other part, the politicians used in 2015 57% of the total amount for military. They could have used it for schools or for whatever, but they used it for military. 57% of the amount the politicians had to invest, they used it for military. So we need to understand that the United States is deeply, deeply dependent on war. And we have to go back to 92, when the Berlin Wall came down and we all looked forward to a world in peace, that was a disaster for the American war industry. And the war industry is owned by the people, by families who had become very, very rich during the Cold War, very rich, and they didn't want to lose this wealth. So in 97, the neocons in the United States, that means Rumsfeld, Cheney, all this whole group, they made a project with the name Project for a New American Century. The task was, how can we regain this status of the American war industry, and how can America again be a global political leader number one? Those two tasks were the problem, because no one wanted to invest in war anymore. So the stocks were down in the cellar, and it really looked bad if you wanted to live off war. In 2000, this report came, and the report is huge. You can find it on the internet. In this report, crisis areas all over the world are described, and many of the crisis areas are the same which General Wesley Clark then in 2001 said Pentagon has ready-to-go plans for invasion of 7 countries in the next 5 years. 7 countries, he named them. And those 7 countries, you also find some of them in the project of a New American Century, in rebuilding America's defenses. The people in this think tank were then put into the Bush administration when Bush came into power. More than 35 of the leading members of the Project on a New American Century went directly into their government as Bush came into power. In this report, it says, this whole glorious future that we are going to have, it will come for sure. Only it'll take a long time if we don't have a new Pearl Harbor. And that is what 9/11 was. It was America's new Pearl Harbor, meaning that was the way to create backup in the people for wars. And but it's exactly, that's how they do it. Do you remember in 1990, I do, because I cried, a little girl stood at the Human Rights Watch Commission and told the world how Saddam Hussein's soldiers had been going into the hospital where she was a nurse, taking out the babies from the incubators and torn them on the table. There we have a young girl crying, telling us that babies have been killed. We all react. That's all we need. We get a shock and we just say, all right, we have to do something, although we're not violent. The only problem is it was a lie. It was a lie. It was not a mistake. It was a lie. It was a planned lie. The young girl was the daughter of the ambassador to the Kuwaiti ambassador to the U.S., and she was instructed by a huge American advertising company, which is connected to the deep powers in Washington. So you just have to look at the history. We have been lied to again and again. And the problem is, you don't have to believe me. You shouldn't. I don't care if anyone believes me anymore. I tell what I see.
And the thing is, when you look at the facts, I mean, when you look at, for example, the power structures within the American media in 1980, 83, 84, there were over 50 different corporations that ran, most of the American media. And once you get up to our time, 2012 numbers, I do believe it was, 6 corporations own more than 90% of the media. So it's just amazing to see how a group of ultra-rich individuals, like you say, that do not practice capitalism based on trustworthiness and honesty and a fair trade for everyone to rise. Yeah. But they practice a kind of distorted capitalism of greed to make sure only the 1% rise and soon own everything. So somebody's stealing our democracy away from us, and somebody's introducing an illiberal, authoritarian and totalitarian system into the West today, because you see the media as well, nobody will write about it. Why? They'll be fired. The owners of the newspapers and the conglomerates owning those again all end up with the 1%. So to me it seems like the media itself, even here in Europe and especially gross in the United States, are like a voice for the totalitarian system and a pure propaganda channel. I mean, one is not even allowed to have a second opinion. So this is like the killing of the Western free speech. It's the killing of the Western critical journalism.
It is. But it goes even further than that, because for the last 3 or 4 months, German newspapers have been practicing more and more an automatic delete of critical comments. So if one is critical against Angela Merkel or whatever, there's a risk that this comment will not even be posted on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or on the comment fields of the newspapers. It will be automatically deleted. So if you look at that, then you take out all the critical comments, and the rest of the discussion will then be the foundation on which the politicians that can make the politics. It's totally out of control. But I can tell you who's behind it, or maybe not who's behind it, but the instrument is surely the CIA. And it's not about secret agents running around. It's actually about facts that the CIA in 75, it came out that 77, they had more than 400 American journalists on the payroll in 77. And it was Carl Bernstein, one of the Watergate journalists, who wrote the book about it, CIA and the Media. So we can say that was in 77. Oh, thank God they don't do that anymore. But they do. 2014, Udo Ulfkotte, a German journalist, he's been 15 years at the Frankfurter Allgemeine. He writes a book where he says that the corruption of German journalists is widely known, and it's normal, it's routine. If you don't do what is expected, your career will be cut short. And that's the way it is. Okay, that's just a journalist. You can say, good, then I have the...
And we have the same in Norway.
Okay.
We have exactly the same in academia here. Among professors, they don't dare to write an article. They know precisely what they would like to say.
Yeah.
But there I speak to many of them. They say, it's good you can do it, Hanne, because you're not dependent on a payroll from anybody, so you can write it.
That's the point.
It's the end of the career.
That is exactly the point. That's become clear to me now. The independency is the point. And thank God that my life has formed so that I live with very little, I need very little, so I can get around. But if I had been 20 years in the mainstream media, having a huge salary, a wife and 3 kids and a good life, I wouldn't want to lose that life again. And that's exactly how they do it.
And this is precisely the situation of the intellectuals in Germany again in the 1930s, because when you see in the 1930s, so many of them saw the totalitarianism rising. Everyone has to have the same opinion, everybody has to agree with everything, comments deleted when it's not, not using authors or whoever commentator who don't agree with the politically correct. Precisely what we saw in Germany in the 1930s and the silence among the intellectuals is precisely what we're seeing in the American structures today. What is this? Why has the left also, that used to have so many good ideals, why did they abandon so easily their values and now become a totalitarian and illiberal? It's a lack of tolerance. It's the killing of the free speech in the West and the reinforcing of the same system from Germany into the American system. It's unbelievable to live in a time where this permeates our everyday life.
It is, but once you realize that it is so, it's sort of a liberation, because that explains a lot of things. But one thing we also have to be very aware about is the fact that not only do these forces use the media, and they do control the media in terms of geopolitics and international politics and so. Not only that, but they are very active in the social media. A very good example is we had in Germany a couple of years ago, in August 2015, a huge tsunami of refugees coming into Germany, refugees from all over. And it came after a Twitter campaign with the saying, Germany welcomes refugees. This Germany welcomes refugees went all over Twitter, tens of thousands of tweets, and it was a massive campaign. So you could say, I even when I saw it, I don't tweet, but if I did, I would have done it, because it's a good thing. There are refugees, people having trouble. We want to help them. Basically good. The problem is, this campaign was not made by Germans. This campaign was initiated by 3 huge server centers in the United States, in England, and in Australia. Mm-hmm. So what we do know is, it was not the Germans having vacation in those 3 countries in those days. It was computer servers. It's called social bots. It's a robot. It's a computer robot, and it's not human. But the problem is, this campaign went all over the social media, went to Facebook. It even made it to the evening news in Germany. And when the evening news in Germany then say, the Germans are now welcoming refugees with their open arms. That might be so, but it wasn't the Germans. It came from somewhere else. Exactly the same with the campaign we had recently, Merkel must go. It was also such a Twitter campaign. But it wasn't the people tweeting, it was computer-generated bots, meaning you can spit out 10,000 tweets in one tweet, and it wasn't the will of the people. But when the evening news or the media then take these campaigns and broadcast them as if it were the real thing, then we are really, really so far from knowing anything about the public opinion than we have ever been before.
So it's the de-democratization of the West.
It surely is.
And a reintroduction into the totalitarian systems. We know this from, it's threatening to read Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, and books like George Orwell. It's amazing to see how a small elite has been able to do this. And cause the calamity of millions. Also, it's ironic because we say we're fighting for democracy and we say we're fighting for human rights. Yet where are the human rights for the Arab lives and for the people living in the Middle East? So I would say also that the racial awareness within the neocon movement, to me, is a tendency towards precisely that type of Nazism, which we again also saw in Germany in the 1930s. Because you do catalog, don't you, people according to skin color, and according to which nationalities we like and which we don't like. And apparently Arab lives count for nothing. This is why one uses the proxy wars. Let their sons fight and die. Right. And this is precisely what the Romans also did at the end of the Roman Empire. And I'm thinking we're forgetting, has nobody read like Edward Gibbon here? You know, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, how it was precisely Alaric, the Gothic and Germanic tribal warrior who helped the Romans, and it was precisely he that came and sacked Rome.
Yeah. But I really think the comparison is valid. We do live in the last ages of this empire. With the name of the USA. But you mentioned the Nazis. I would like to point out, I sincerely doubt that they actually lost World War II. I just think they found somewhere else to be, and I can prove that because it's a proven fact that the CIA had thousands of Nazis when took thousands of Nazis from Germany into America and employed them at the CIA. So did the FBI. We know that, thousands of Nazis. And what did the CIA actually do? Well, in 1951, that means 4 years after, these Nazis in the CIA spread out LSD in France, in a little village in France. In 1953, the Nazis in the CIA started the Operation Aerodynamic, which is, they went into Ukraine, 1953, in order to destabilize and Nazify the country. They took up contact with the Banderas, very, very bad Nazis, in order to stimulate this Nazi movement. And that's the reason we have 80 paramilitary groups in Ukraine now running around with arms and guns and whatever. The Nazis, the CIA, are behind it. They are behind it.
Yeah,
it's no conspiracy. It is a fact.
But because it's also true that after the Second World War, of course, the Red Armies were eventually seen as a threat to Europe. So this was the time where, this is also well documented, that they employed the Germans to try to deter in the beginning of the Cold War, to use them in
it started 1.5 years before the war stopped. Both Russia and the United States competed in getting the best German scientists, the best German engineers and whatever, and they took them 1.5 years before the war ended. They prepared this transition. I think it was Bob Hope who commented on the Russians being able to send up the Sputnik as the first one. He said, well, that only goes to show that the Russians have better German scientists than we have. So it's out in the open. But please do not forget that Eisenhower said in 1961, he warned about this unwarranted influence of the military-industrial complex, meaning the CIA. Kennedy warned about it in 61 as well. He actually said there is a conspiracy against democracy. He used the word conspiracy. And 4 years later, CIA introduced the term conspiracy theorist as a weapon to silence anyone questioning the official story. That's 1967, as far as I remember.
And that's massively used today.
That's massively used today.
Anybody who disagrees with that one opinion we're allowed to have in this new German structure, to allude to the 1930s.
Yeah.
Anyone who voices any opposition is instantly called a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
Or a racist.
Right.
Or a homophobe. Or a white supremacist, or whatever it is.
Well, I'm gladly, I can be it all. I don't care. I'm here to do my job as a journalist, which means I try to tell about the world as I see it, as good as I can. Which does not mean that I don't tell the truth. There's no such thing as truth. But if you had a variety of free journalists, a free independent press, you would get a variety of stories about the world. So you would have the foundation to select the right politicians.
And that's what Michel Foucault also spoke about in Fearless Speech. The need for the critical voices to pose questions to power. Yes. Because if there's no check on power, what's the use of the principles of Montesquieu? I mean, you have to have the separation of the powers. If they're all together in one group, then that's the definition of a totalitarian system. So this is the end of free speech in the West. Is that what we're facing?
Well, I can say it's the end of. It has been the end of free speech in Denmark. That's for sure. There was one journalist looking at the case 9/11, and that was me. I'm no longer in Denmark. And there is one scientist, Niels Harrit, who's been doing the same thing. One. So that means two persons out of a population of, what do I know, 5-6 millions. The problem is, as Nils Harrit says, I know him very well, people just don't want to talk to you anymore. The phone, I remember from myself, I made a book about 9/11 in 2008, and I put it in the post to every member of the Danish parliament, and I heard nothing, not one word. So I tried to email them and call them and whatever. I heard nothing, not one reaction.
But this explains...
No, but sorry, but that's the point. If you take something to the parliament, and a case as serious as this with 9/11, and it's massive, ignored, then we really have a democracy problem.
Thank you very much, Tommy Hansen, founder and host of the Free21 influential site, more than 150 writers, Danish, Berlin-based. Thank you very much for joining us here at the Herland Report.
Thank you for having me.